All right, we're ready to start Basics of Biblical Hebrew, Chapter 17. This will be on the Vav Consecutive. So, get started with the agenda. We're going to look at Hebrew insights, and then we'll go over the workbook, see if there's any questions. We'll go over translations, then we'll study Vav Consecutives. Might seem confusing, but I don't know. It's really not that hard to get used to and go over the vocabulary. All right, so for today, we want to look at words for the words of God. What Hebrew words are used in reference to the Word of God? And of course, when we say the Word of God, that's a genitive, as it were. And there's two ways of expressing that: the Word of God or God's Word. Both mean the same thing. In previous lessons, we've looked at the names, the divisions, the structure, the order of the Hebrew Scriptures, the books in the Hebrew Bible. And a number of words are used to refer to God's word. We see them in places like Psalm 19. We're going to specifically look at, obviously in Psalm 119, there's also a number of words that are used, but we're going to look at Psalm 19 and Nehemiah 9:13 and the words that are used there. Psalm 19, verses 7 through 11. We have the law of the Lord is perfect, restoring the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of the Lord are true. They are righteous altogether. So we see law, testimony, precepts, commandment, judgments. They are more desirable than gold, yes, than much fine gold, sweeter also than honey and the drippings of the honeycomb. Moreover, by them your servant is warned, and in keeping them there is great reward. And then Nehemiah 9:13, then you came down on Mount Sinai and spoke with them from heaven. You gave just ordinances and true laws, good statutes and commandments. So there's some other words there. Now, we saw law before. Now we're looking at ordinances and statutes. Commandments. We saw that too. So what are these words in Hebrew? What do they mean? And are they synonyms? So the first one we look at is devar. Devar means a word. It's the thing that is spoken. Fact is, if you turn that into a verb, it becomes speak. That's the word for speak. And it's always in the PL, which we haven't studied yet, but we'll get to that. But that's what God has said. It's a word, a thing spoken. It's what God has said. And we have Torah. That's a law. Sometimes it's even could be translated instruction, because the law is instruction on what is right and what is wrong. It's instruction on regulation. It's teaching on right and wrong. And so oftentimes translated law. Mitzvah. Mitzvah means a command or a commandment. That's orders given. Chok is statute. I have statutes, and actually the Hebrew word here is singular, but I have a plural here. That's chochim, probably. But anyway, it's cutting in a boundary. It'd be the kind of the more wooden or literal meaning, but the way it's used is statutes or customs. Sometimes it'll be in reference to a practice that certain people have or something like that. They be a decree on how to live. So statutes, mishpat is a judgment, and sometimes it's good to translate it as an ordinance. You just have to look at the context. And so it's an ordinance would be, or even the judgment would be rules and their consequences. Then pikudim are precepts. That's the thing appointed or charged, not charged like a battery, not charged like a credit card, but charged in the way of like an order, a thing ordered, the thing not ordered as in put in order like sequence, but an order, the thing appointed or charged, an order charged, precepts. Then we have a dut, testimony. A testimony is an eyewitness account, and this is closely tied to the Ten Commandments, and those were put into the Ark of the Testimony. Is what the Ark of the Covenant is sometimes called, Ark of the Covenant and Ark of the Testimony. The testimony was put in there. And then the tabernacle is often called the tabernacle of the testimony as well. God has given his testimony on how everything was created, about human history. And because of God's testimony, what he has said who he is, what he's done. We owe obedience to him. Um, so really all the scriptures could be called the testimony because this is God's word telling us historical things, prophetic things. It's God's testimony, past, present, and future. And then from Nehemiah 9:13, we have Mishpatim Yesharim. Mishpatim Yesharim. Mishpatim would be the judgments or sometimes ordinances. And then Yesharim is upright, straight, or they're just right. So that would be the upright judgments or upright ordinances. And then we have the Torot, and so that's and laws. We have the feminine plural ending there. Laws, emet. Emet is, emet is truth. Sometimes emet is also means faithful, true and faithful. And then here we have the Huchim, that's our statutes, and mitzvot, that's commandments. And then we have Tovim, which is good ones. And so we have masculine plural here, we have masculine plural here. And so these two really go together. This is feminine, the commandments are feminine, but it could be because it splits these, it splits the statutes with the adjective good ones. It could be that they're both covered, good statutes and commandments. Okay, that was it. So those are just some of the words that God's word uses to refer to itself. So I want to look at helpful study habits. I didn't have this on the agenda, but this doesn't take very long. Studies show that you memorize better if you study in 25-minute intervals. So just you're better off studying 25 minutes, getting up, doing something else, and come back for another 25 minutes instead of sitting there for an hour all at once. Vocabulary, just start off learning like 3 words at a time. Make sure you have those 3 words and then add one to it, and or 2 or whatever you can, whatever works for you. But just build on that. Repetition is the key building block for effectively memorizing information. So review often. So after you've memorized those 3 words, then you want to make sure you review them when you add a couple of words to it. Do not study after a meal or with noise in the background, which could be music or TV or just people doing things, with interruptions like email, texting, and social media, and while trying to multitask or in crowded places, where in crowded places you would also have distractions. So if you can happen to get that kind of an environment, that'll help you with your learning Hebrew. And these study helps come from the book by Adam Howell, who does the Daily Dose of Hebrew. He wrote a book called Hebrew for Life, and that's where these suggestions come from. All right, so let's go on to the workbook then. For chapter 16, are there any questions on the workbook? I did not see any errors in it, or that I had made note of errors on it. All right, then let's go ahead and go to the Bible translation. That starts on page 66 and goes to 67. I think that's it. So translation number 1 comes from Genesis 6:4. The Nephilim, they were in the land in the days of those ones, so in those days, and also after of thus, when, or maybe it could be who, that's just Asher, it could be that, which, who, any of that would be. So let's go with who. They came in, or they come in, the sons of God, to the daughters of the man, and they bore to them. All right. Just looking through this, of course we're studying, this is on chapter 16. This would be on imperfect weak verbs. And the second word from the end on the first line, they entered, or they came in, or That's yavou, yavou. Why is that a weak verb? It's because bo is a hollow verb, or it's a two yod vav word, and um, the vav drops out. You don't see it there. You have the bait, and you have the aleph, and there's no vav in there. So that's a weak verb. But even that being the case, we see the yod on the front for the preformative. We have the shurik on the end for the subformative, and we can recognize that as a third masculine plural. And I believe that's the only weak verb there. Actually, no. The next to last word, and they bore, um, it's a one yod verb, and we have a yod there, but the one yod fled, it dropped out. And so the yod we have is the preformative, and we know that something happened because we have a commas there, the vowel lengthened. So we have the yod preformative, we have the shurik subformative, and so this is a third masculine. No, that doesn't make sense. Yeah, that yes. Third masculine plural. Well, now I'm beginning to second guess myself. You know what? I'm going to back away from that because that Vav is not a Vav consecutive, at least not for an imperfect. And so that's actually probably the shurik is probably the third plural on a perfect, and the perfect would be yalad there in the middle. I think that's what that is. I should check that. So I think, yeah, the second word on the second to the last word on the first line is the only weak verb we have here. Number 2, we have Exodus 21:1. And these, and then we're going to have to supply a to be verb are. We often have verbless clauses in Hebrew, so that's not unusual. And these are the judgments, or we could say the ordinances. We talked about that a bit ago in our insights section. These are the judgments or the ordinances that you will put to the face of them, or just before them. Actually, faces. Face is always plural. And so, but we wouldn't say to the face of them, we'd say before them. So these are the ordinances that you will put before them, or the judgments you will put before them. So the verb here is tasim. And again, this is a hollow verb, but the yod is still there. It doesn't go away on the imperfect. And so with the tav preformative, it could be a second masculine singular, or it could be a third feminine singular, but in the context, it's referring to you singular. You will put. Okay, then number 3, Deuteronomy 31:7. Because you will go with the people, this one, so with this people, to the land which he swore, who did? Yahweh, which Yahweh swore to the fathers of them. Okay, third word in, tavo. We have the bo again, but we do have the in the imperfect, it doesn't drop out, that vav. So it's pretty easy to see the whole thing there. But it's, again, the tav performant is going to be either second masculine singular or third feminine singular. So you will go. Sometimes it's you will go, you will come, you will enter. Those are all possibilities for that one too. But since this is it looks like this is a command to Joshua, that he's the one who's going to enter the land with the people. That's it'll be second masculine singular. Okay, number 4, Genesis 22:12. Not you will send the hand of you to the young man. and not you will do to him anything, because now I know that fear of God you. So you, we'll move that atah up before that, that you fear God. You fear God. This is obviously Abraham and Isaac on the and after Moriah. And let's see, we've got the second word in. There's our imperfect, and it's a weak verb. Why is it a weak verb? Because of the third chet, the third root chet there, tishlach. But it's still easy to see that we have a top performative, we have no subformative. It's going to be a second masculine singular. And then we have us. That's another one. We have the top performative. Again, second masculine singular, you will do. You will send, not you will send your hand, and not you will do. Okay, number 5, Exodus 6:1, we have atah. When it has an ayin, that means now. If it had an aleph, it would mean you, but this is now. You will see what I will do to Pharaoh. All right. The second word in, tireh, we have a pav performative, second masculine singular. Why is it a weak verb? Because it's a 3-hey. And then the next one is right before Pharaoh, essay, I will do. We see we have an aleph performative, and this is a doubly weak verb because the ayin in the root 1 is a guttural, and of course the hey is also a guttural. But again, we don't see, it doesn't affect the preformatives and subformatives at all. It's still easy to see which way it's going. This is, you will see, now you will see what I will do. Number 6, Genesis 15:1. After the things or the words, there's devar, hadevarim, so it could be the words, but it's also used for things or matters, that kind of thing. So after the things of these, so after these things, he was the word of Yahweh to Abram in the vision to say, not you will fear, Abram. Okay, and so as I look through here, the imperfect, that is a weak verb, is going to be the next to last word right before the second Abram. And we have tirah. We see the ta performative, and so it's again going to be second masculine singular. We have the yara. We have a 1 yod, but the yod's still there. And we have a 3 aleph as well. Notice that the resh, the comets under the resh that are lengthened to a comets, because you get the lengthening of the vowel right before a quiescent aleph. And then number 7 from Deuteronomy 10:20. We have some fronting here for look at the very first thing is a definite direct object marker. That means the direct object has been moved forward. This is called fronting for emphasis. And so Yahweh, God of you, or your God, Yahweh your God, you will fear. And then we have the object brought forward again the second time. Him you will serve. So it's emphasizing Yahweh, your God, you will fear. Him you will serve. So we see 2 emphasis. So the first one is the you will fear right after Elohecha. We have tirah. And again, we saw this in the previous one. It's a tav preformative, so that's going to be a second masculine singular. We have a 1 yod and a 3 aleph, and the vowel under the resh lengthened to a comets. And then the last word, we have a tav performative. We have the ayin. The ayin can't take a shva, so it's moved to a reduced patak there. You will serve. Him you will serve. All right. So that's a 1 guttural. Number 8, Deuteronomy 13:5. After Yahweh your God, or the God of you, after Yahweh your God, you will walk, and him you will fear, and the commandments of him you will keep, or you will guard, or you will watch over. Um, and um, and on the voice of him you all will listen, and him you will serve. All right, let's go back through and look for imperfect weak verbs. So the one, two, three, fourth word in, we have halach, and halach acts like a one noon. The hay drops out, and so we get so really all we have left of the root is the lamed and kaf there. Um, and so when I don't know if I said it or not, I probably should have said you all will walk, because this is that we have a top reformative, we have the shuric subformative. That's a second masculine plural. So after Yahweh your God, you all will walk, and him you all will fear. We have the top reformative, shuric subformative. That's the same verb we saw in the last two verses with the same comments under the resh. And commandments of him you all will keep. We have the tav preformative and the shuric subformative on shamar. And then on the next line, second word in, we have you will listen. Tishma'u. Tishma'u, of course, this is a third ayin. So it's like I say, a weak verb. We have the tav preformative and shuric subformative, second person plural. And then the last word, you all will serve. We have top reformative, shuric, subformative, second masculine, plural. And we have a root one guttural, ayin there. All right, number 9 from Deuteronomy 29:5, which I think in English is 29:6. That's why you have a 6 there. In Hebrew, it's 29:5, but in English, it would be 29:6. Bread, not you all ate, and wine and strong drink, um, not you all drank, in order that you all will know that and we're going to supply a to be verb, am, that I am Yahweh, your God, the God of you, your God. Okay, last word on the first line, we have Teda'u. Teda'u, we have a, excuse me, we have top preformative and a shuric subformative, and so it's you all will know. And I think that's the only one in this one. Only one being an imperfect, call imperfect weak verb. Okay, number 10 from Psalm 23:4. Not I will fear evil because you, and then we're going to supply the to be verb are with me. You are with me. Now the second word in, we have the word for fear again, and the aleph is quiescent. We got the comments under the resh because the aleph quiesced. We have the aleph preformative. There's no subformative, so this is a first person common singular. I don't know if I made that clear on what was the other one we had, a first person. That was on number 5. We had I will do. The aleph is the first common singular preformative. All right, then number 11, Genesis 15:13, a sojourner or a stranger or something like that, he will be the seed of you in a land not to them or not for them. Basically it means not theirs, a land not theirs. And so the second word in, yeh, he will be, it's haya, that's the root of the word, and then we have a yod preformative for which makes it a and then no subformative, so it makes it a third masculine singular. But we have haze in the first and third root letters, so that's a doubly weak verb too. Any questions on any of that? Okay. Then let's do a review of the paradigms, because we're going to be talking about both call perfects and call imperfects in today's lesson about Vav consecutives. So a call is the stem, and it means active, simple action. Perfect is the conjugation, and that means completed action. And so like katal, since it's completed action, we put it in the past, he killed. And we'll go ahead and review the call perfect strong paradigm. This is from chapter 13, but it also has to be memorized. This is the way it's in the book, but I'm not going to spend time on this one. I'm going to go to the way I have it memorized because it was easier for me. You can memorize whichever one is easier for you. So we have katalti, katalt. I'm sorry. Let me do that again. Katalta. Okay. I'm going to start from the beginning again. Katalti, katalta, katalt, katal, katala, katalnu, kataltem, katalten, katalu. So no preformatives, only subformatives. Perfects are only subformatives. And everything's got a subformative except for the third masculine singular, katal, nothing added to it. This is the lexical form. Okay. And we studied call. That was back in chapter 13. Now we're looking at chapter 15. Chapter 15, we looked at call imperfect. Call is still the stem for active, simple action, but imperfect is the conjugation to indicate incomplete action. And so we normally would do the future translation on it. So we have yiktol, he will kill. And we'll go over the imperfect paradigm again. We've done this several weeks in a row now. This is the way it's in the book, but this is the way I memorized it because it was easier for me. So we have ektol, tiktol, tiktali, yiktol, tiktol, niktol, tiktalu, tiktolna, yiktalu, tiktolna. Every one of them has a preformative. Nothing does not. Not a one of them misses a preformative. Half of them have subformatives. And so when it has a preformative, it's an imperfect, incomplete action. All right. So now, with that little bit of review, we're ready to look at Vav consecutives. You are entering into a dimension of sight, a dimension of sound, a dimension of mind. You are entering into the opposite zone. Of course, anybody that's somewhere around my age would remember this is a kind of a takeoff from the Twilight Zone, the beginning of the Twilight Zone, where I'm going to call it the opposite zone. And a little cartoon here, Calvin and Hobbes. Ha ha, I stole your flag, but I hit you with a Calvin ball. You have to put the flag back and sing the I'm very sorry song. I don't have to sing the song. I was in the no song zone. No, you weren't. I touched the opposite pole. That's what we're keying off of here, the opposite pole. So the no song zone is now the song zone. I didn't see you touch the opposite pole. You have to declare it. I declared it oppositely by not declaring it. Start singing. And so the opposite zone, you'll find out here pretty soon why I'm calling it that. So we've learned that the call perfect verbs are completed action, generally translated as English past tense. We've also learned that the call imperfect verbs are incomplete action, generally translated as English future or present tense. The Vav consecutive is the opposite zone, and the Vav is the opposite pole, hence the cartoon. Perfects will be translated as imperfects and vice versa. Imperfects will be translated as perfects. And you think, wow, this is just kind of confusing. Well, I think it'll make more sense to you as we go through the lesson. The imperfect verb form occurs 15,967 times in the Hebrew Old Testament. The imperfect verbs with a Vav consecutive occurs 15,033 times, almost as many as without the Vav consecutive. So it appears Vav consecutives appear on imperfect verbs almost as often as you have imperfect verbs. These are not the same words. This is not like 15,033 out of 15,967. This is how many don't have a Vav consecutive. This is how many that do have a Vav consecutive. So it's almost half and half. So we want to understand the function of the Vav consecutive. We want to be able to translate Vav consecutives with the imperfect verbs. We want to identify Vav consecutives with imperfect verbs. We want to be able to translate Vav consecutives with the perfect verbs and identify Vav consecutives with perfect verbs. Those perfect. We're going to look at the imperfects first, okay, because that's really the easiest and they're the most numerous. So first of all, understand the function of the Vav consecutive. Vav consecutive, well, it has a Vav, you know what that is, and it tells us when something is consecutive, like an action is consecutive. A Vav attached to a verb, and it's a verb, only a verb. You never have a Vav consecutive tied to a noun or an adjective or a particle or a definite direct object marker. Anywhere else you can have and. It's only on a verb that it indicates that things are happening consecutively. By happening consecutively, we're saying and then. So he did this, and then he did that, and then he did that, and so for however many there are. That's what a Vav consecutive gives us, the and then. So that's what the function of a Vav consecutive is to indicate the and then. But to be able to translate Vav consecutives with imperfect verbs, so what happens to it? Imperfect verbs normally translated in English with a future tense. So we have yiktol, and normally we're going to say he will kill. We have a yod preformative, third masculine singular, no subformative at all. So we'd say he will kill. That is if it does not have a Vav consecutive. Now, imperfect verbs with a Vav consecutive normally translate into English with a past tense. So we have vayiktol. There's our Vav consecutive. Actually, it also incorporates this. But this is still our 3ms preformative, and then katal means kill. So he will kill, but now we have the Vav consecutive on it, and so it'll become and he killed. And then you say then if you wanted to. We don't usually say then, but that's what it's telling us. And then he killed. So it changes the imperfect to a past tense. And then he killed. So that's how we translate it. And now we want to be able to identify it. How do we know we're looking at a Vav consecutive? Well, it looks like a Vav. And a conjunction Vav has a shva. Oops. But for the pause is too long on that. Or maybe I'm thinking of a different slide. Okay. Yeah, conjunction Vav has a shva. Vav consecutive with imperfect verbs will have the Vav. Well, this is the one that disappears. There it goes. But we don't have a shva. We get a patak. And so it's pretty easy to tell when you're looking at an imperfect. If the Vav has a shva and it's an imperfect, it's not a consecutive. Okay? So if it's got the Vav and the patak and a dagesh, we know it's a Vav consecutive. So how does this look in real life? Well, vayiktol, we just looked at that a little bit ago. We have a Vav consecutive, we have the dagesh, we have that patak, and so that's a Vav consecutive. So we'd say, and he killed, and he killed. We're going to translate it past tense. Okay, here's the Vav consecutive. Let's try a different word. Vayomer, and he said. Amar is to speak, and we have that yod, third masculine singular, preformative, and he said. So we can put it on other words. Vatiz kor, zakar means to remember. It also, if it's a noun, it means male, but when it's a verb, it means remember. I don't know if there's any significance to that. I don't think so. But again, we see that we have the patak and we got the dagesh, And so, and well, and with the tav, this is going to be a 2ms. It's going to be you, and you remembered, and you remembered. We translated it in the past, but we recognize it because we have the vav, we got the dagesh, we got the patak there. All right, let's try another one. Oh, we got a problem here. Now, katol means to kill. Aleph is the preformative for the first common singular. So if you didn't have the Vav consecutive, you'd say just ecto, that's I will kill, I will kill. But we have the Vav consecutive. Let me go ahead and leave that there. We have the Vav consecutive, but we got a problem. We can't have a dagesh on the Aleph. So then what happens? Well, if you just think of it moving down, and it becomes a comments. So that still means, and I killed, and I killed. We don't have the dagesh, but we did get compensatory lengthening. Okay. The spelling of most imperfect verbs will not change with the addition of a Vav consecutive, but words that can shorten will. And how does that happen? Well, we recognize these letters, the Yod, Vav, Nun, Hey, especially the Yod, Vav, and Hey, they will drop out. And so we'll see that happening with spelling. So we have Bana, which means he built. We turned it into an imperfect. This is a perfect, he built. So then we go to an imperfect. We put the Yod preformative on it, which is 3ms. And so let's go back again. There is no preformative. There is no subformative. That's how come I said it's a perfect. This used to be a 3ms, a perfect, call perfect 3ms. All right, now let's go back here. So now we have a preformative. He will build, but we're going to put a Vav consecutive on it. And so this becomes Vayiven. So the Hey has dropped out. The Nun switches to a final form, but the rest of it's pretty much the same. We have that the dagesh is now assimilated in the Yod, and we have the patak under the Vav. So it's still pretty easy to see, and he built. So he will build. The previous screen had he built. This is he will build, and this is and he built. And it's actually like and then he built. Okay, kum, he arose. We're going to make it an imperfect, yakum. So he will arise, but we want to make it add a vav consecutive to it. And so the vav moves over, the dagesh goes into the yod. The vav in the shirk here drops out. It's not there anymore. We still have this yod preformative, 3ms. And so, and he arose, and he arose. It becomes past tense because of the Vav consecutive. And again, it's Vav consecutive. As soon as you see the patak there, you got a pretty good idea it's going to be. And then if you see the dagesh, unless this is a guttural or something, we get that dagesh there, or reish. Vav consecutive, a vav attached to a verb that indicates that things are happening consecutively. It's attached to a verb. It is never to a noun or anything else. You can have vavs. A vav on anything else is a conjunction vav, not a consecutive vav. Okay, if we look at the book on page 180, you have a chart. Actually, let's look at page 179 first as you're turning there. You look at page 179, the bottom of the page, and you can just scan down through there, and you see vav with the patak all the way down, except for the first person's common singular. Why does that change to comments? Because it can't have the dagesh and the aleph, and so you get compensatory lengthening. And besides that, they're all vavs with a patak. If this was a conjunction vav, it would have a shva. Okay, and then in all the preformatives, you have a dagesh, except for the aleph in the 1CS. Okay, so it's very, very consistent. Now we go ahead and flip the page to 180. And the thing here that I want you to see is that the preformatives and subformatives don't change. When you look at the first line there, whether you're looking at a regular conjunction on the right or the Vav consecutive on the left, the Yod preformative for the 3MS, the Tav preformative for the 3FS, the Tav preformative for the 2MS, the Tav preformative and the Hirik Yod subformative for the 2FS, all the way down, they never ever change form by putting on a Vav consecutive. But you can see the difference there. Whether if it's a Vav conjunction, they all have schvas all the way down. And the Vav consecutive is never a schwa all the way down. Okay. Notice the pataks and the comets as opposed to the schwa. All right. A series of imperfect verbs with Vav consecutives normally denote sequences of consecutive actions in the past. We're going to look at some examples of this. Actions may be consecutive temporally, logically, sequentially, or consequentially. Okay, so here's a phrase, and we see, I think the next one will highlight those. Yep, there we go. And so we have vayakom. Oh, by the way, we have vayakom because here's the accent mark. That means this comb here is a closed unaccented syllable. So that means this comets is actually the O vowel. Okay, so we see the patak here, we see the patak here, we see the patak here, we see the dagesh there, we see the dagesh there, we see the dagesh there, and so it's obvious that these are all Vav consecutives. The Yod is the preformative for 3MS, and it's the case for all of these. These are all 3MS imperfects with Vav consecutives. So what does it say? It says, and he arose, Abram, and he went up. So this is the first thing. And or it's actually the next thing after whatever was before it. And he arose. Abram did arose. This is a good verb, subject, word order in Hebrew. And he went up. That's the next thing that happened, to the mountain. And he built there an altar to Yahweh. We're going to use this different ways here in future slides here. A series of imperfect verbs with Vav consecutives may begin with a perfect verb. And so we're going to just alter this a little bit. Then we have Abram first. And Abram arose. He arose. And he went up to the mountain. And he built there an altar to Yahweh. Okay? And they can begin with imperfect verbs with a Vav consecutive. So we'll alter it again a little bit. So it's all going to be in the past here because these are, and he arose, Abram, and he went up to the mountain, and he built there an altar to Yahweh. But again, we see the patak and the dagesh, patak and dagesh, patak, dagesh. Those are all Vav consecutives. And even though they all have preformatives, the formative yods here, 3MS, they're going to be past tense. Yeah. Okay, so that's another way that a sequence of events can be listed. And then you can also have a temporal modifier. So here's Vayehi. Vayehi, we still have a Vav with a patak. So this is still, but notice we don't have a dagesh. This is still a Vav consecutive. And so if it didn't have the Vav, and it was just Yehi, that would be a 3MS, he will be. But We do have a Vav consecutive. And so instead of he will be, since this is an imperfect, and he was, or and it was, there is no it in Hebrew. It's either he or she. We just have to bring it over to English as it. So we can say, and it was in the days of those. So in those days, and he arose, Abram, and he went up to the mountain, and he built there an altar to Yahweh. So that's how you can get a series of events, and that's how it can get kicked off. And you get kicked off with a perfect, you can get kicked off with an imperfect, and it can get kicked off with a temporal modifier. And it was, and it came, or I think King James, and it came to pass. That's often what's behind that. If an imperfect verb has a Vav consecutive, it's always the first word in a clause, not the verse, not a sentence, but in a clause, it's always going to be the first one in the clause. A clause that begins with anything else interrupts the sequence, but the sequence may continue after the interruption. All right, so we looked at imperfect verbs. Now we want to look at perfect verbs, which is not quite as easy. I mean, it's really, really obvious when we're looking at all imperfects. When we get to perfects, it's not quite as clear. But perfect verbs are normally translated in the past tense, like katal, he killed, unless there's a Vav consecutive, which we don't have here in this example, but we will have. We'll look at that here soon. So perfect verbs with a Vav consecutive are normally translated in English with a future tense. So just the opposite of the imperfect. So we go to past tense. Perfects we go to, it's like I said, it's the opposite zone. So here's v'katal, and we would translate, and he will kill, and he will kill. Katal is usually he killed, but with the Vav consecutive, we're going to just assume this is a consecutive, and he will kill. And we're going to look into this further. That by itself will be confusing. So that's how you translate it. Now we want to be able to identify them. Okay, so a conjunction Vav looks like a Vav with a shva. A Vav consecutive with perfect verbs looks exactly the same way. A Vav with a shva. They look exactly the same. So we v'katal. In fact, as people often call that vekatal, which is based off of that. And he will kill. So let's look at this more closely. So with a Vav consecutive, vekatal here, vekatal, it is, and he will kill. But what if it's a conjunction? Well, it's vekatal, and he killed. So in this case, this is a consecutive, this is not. This is conjunction, and he killed. So how do you tell them apart? Usually by context. Almost always you have to go by context. There's very, very few other identifiers. The few identifiers will be in the 1CS and the 2MS perfect verbs. You will see an accent shift. And so we have the accent over this tet, but here it's over the tav. Otherwise, they look exactly the same. The katal T, and then over here, we've got the accent has retracted. It is over the tet again. This is conjunction, and these are consecutive. So the katal ta, the accent moved over to the tav. So that can give you a clue that you're looking at a Vav consecutive. But basically, they look exactly the same. You just have to go by context to see whether it's and I killed. This is not a consecutive. And you killed. There's a tav subformative. Or this is the 1CS subformative. This is the 2MS subformative. And then on the other side here, with these being Vav consecutives, the katal T, the emphasis is on the T, not Vicatalti, it's Vicatalti, and I will kill, and then Vicatalta, and you will kill. It still keeps the one CS and two MS. The subformatives do not change. Okay, so again, how do we get these into a series of events? A series of perfect verbs with Vav consecutives may begin with an imperfect verb. And Abram, he will arise, and he will go up. Notice that this is a perfect. This is a 3MS perfect, but this is a consecutive. And this one is an imperfect 3MS. And so we translate that in the future. And Abram, he will go up, and he will arise, and he will go up to the mountain, and he will build there an altar to Yahweh. And so this one, right. It's because this is the perfect verb that begins with an imperfect verb. So this is the imperfect verb that kicks it off. This tells you it's happening in the future, and then all the Vav consecutives on the perfects after that are continuing with that future consecutive actions in the future. Yeah. So that's hard to read now, but yes, there's no Vav on here because that's going to be translated future because it's a third masculine singular. I'll do it again. And Abram, he will arise because it's imperfect. He will arise, and this is going to be, and he will go up because this is consecutive to the mountain, and he will build there. Okay, so that's one way to kick off consecutives with perfects. Another way to do that is with an imperative verb, and so it says arise. This is state a command here. It's an imperative, which we'll be studying imperatives next week. We haven't done that yet. So arise, Abram, and you will go up. Vav consecutive. Here's the 2MS subformative. Now the ta ending. Arise, Abram, and you will go up to the mountain, and you will build there an altar to Yahweh. Okay. Another way to do it is use a temporal modifier. And here's Hayah, that's the lexical form. But we have the Vav consecutive, and it will be in the days, those ones, so in those days, and he will arise. It's the perfect with the Vav consecutive, Abram, and he will go up, Vav consecutive, to the mountain, and he will build, Vav consecutive, he will build there an altar to Yahweh. If a perfect verb has a Vav consecutive, it is always the first word in a clause. A clause that begins with anything else interrupts the sequence. However, the sequence may continue after the interruption. They list at the back of this chapter different terms. We are always going to, in this class, we are always going to use the term Vav consecutive. That's going to be the most common. I think it's the most common use in general, not just in this class, but in general. And so that's what we're going to call it. Now, out of the terms listed on pages 189 and 190, the only other common terms that you'll come across is Vayiktol, which is actually Vayiktol. They'll call it this, they'll write it out like this, Vayiktol, but this is what that's saying. And that means it's a Vav consecutive. We can see the Patak. We can see the Dagesh. And we have this Yod preformative, 3MS preformative. And so that's called the Vayiktol. And you will hear people use that term. Just want you to be able to recognize the terms when you hear them. And then Vekatol, you'll see it spelled out that way. People say Vekatol. Well, basically, they're just saying this. Vekatol. And so that's a Vav consecutive on a perfect. So that's what those terms mean. I will usually refer to a call perfect with like a Vav consecutive, or a call imperfect with a Vav consecutive. But you will hear when you read other books or you're listening to somebody else talk about these things that you may hear the terms Vayikol or Vekatol. One of the others I've heard used some is Vav conversive, and it just means so it's a conversion. It's converting it from like a perfect to an imperfect and like from an imperfect to a perfect. But I don't hear that very often, and so I wouldn't worry about it. The main ones would just be familiar with Vav consecutive and Vayikol and Vekatol. All right. Then I had a comment here on page 187 as they're talking about the translation. Well, they're not talking about translation committee, but they're saying 17.7 on page 187, because of their frequency in certain contexts, the temporal modifiers vayahi and vahaya are best not translated, though the conjunction may still be translated as and. Some will suggest that vayahi be translated as and it came to pass that, and that vahaya will be translated as and it will be that. Given the frequency of the temporal modifiers in the narrative, it is preferable to avoid translations in the interest of good English style. And I'm going to say my addition to this is that it depends on the translation. Why is it being translated? If you end up getting a job on a translation committee and you're working on a translation and the goals of that translation committee are to make it easier to read in English, and they say don't translate them, well, that's what you need to do then. However, I don't know that it would ever happen that I've ever been on a translation committee, or anybody that I'm teaching would probably be on a translation committee. And so for this class, as we do exercises or we're working in the workbooks and everything, I want us to translate every single word. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is, well, first of all, what we read in Hebrew or what we read in Greek, that is what God has breathed. The words of God are breathed by him. And I think it's good not to pass over anything that God has said. But like I say, for this class and for my own personal reading, and I would recommend for your personal reading, that we would want to know exactly what it is that God has said and just bring about every word, every nuance of a word, because sometimes that's where we get insights. Things that get dropped out of translations, then you look at it in Hebrew and you go, oh, wait a minute here. There's something a little bit different here, but you don't notice it unless you're catching everything. So anyway, that's my recommendation on that, is to translate every word, translate it woodenly, especially if this is just for yourself. Or if you end up in a situation where you're translating for somebody else and easier English is part of the goal, then it's okay to follow that rule, but not in this class. Okay. So we've covered all the imperfect verbs and perfect verbs and the function of the Vav consecutive. So let's go to the vocabulary on page 188. Avad. Avad means to perish. Ahav, that's one of the words for love. Asaf is to gather. Galah is to uncover. And Galah can also be used for taking somebody into exile, presumably because when they go into exile, they don't even have the clothes on their backs. That's kind of the way they did things back then. So that's a fairly common way of seeing it, but the main idea of Galah is to uncover. And then Taher means to be clean. Kala is to finish or complete. Room is to be high. I don't know if you think about a room with high ceilings or something like that, a room with, I don't know, something like that. Anyway, room means to be high. Shafat is to judge. Then we get down to nouns. Ohel, you'll see that a lot if you're reading about the tabernacle back in the book of Exodus and so forth. Most times it's going to be Ohel Moed. It's going to be the tent of meeting, but Ohel is tent. Emet, we talked about that a little earlier. It means truth or faithfulness. He doesn't list faithfulness here, but it does Fidelity kind of would be an overlap on faithfulness, I suppose. Dom means blood. And in fact, you even see that in the book of Acts, chapter 1, when it talks about Judas hanging himself and fell, and they called the place the field of blood, and you'll find Dom in that name. When it comes to human bloodshed, somebody kills somebody, murders somebody, a lot of times that blood, Dom will be Damim, it'll be plural. They'll make it plural. But anyway, Dom is blood. Kisei, it could be a chair. It's often, I probably see it used for throne more than anything, but it's throne's very common. But it's a seat, kisei. Then mispar is number. This is a noun, though. This isn't numbering something. This is, but you see the safar at the end. Safar, well, a sefer would be a book. So if you count something, you're going to write down the number. And then the Sopharim are the scribes that write them down, so they're writing down the numbers in the Sefer, the book. Anyway, it's related. The Samic Pei Resh Rut is used in all of those. But Mispar is to count, and then Shemesh. Shemesh is the sun. So if you're coming across a place and it calls it Beit Shemesh, that's the house of the sun. Any questions? Okay, assignment. If you haven't memorized the perfect paradigm and the imperfect paradigm, need to do that, because you're going to be using these paradigms. For the perfect, it's going to be subformatives, imperfect is going to be preformatives, and sometimes subformatives. We're going to be using those until we get to chapter 36. Chapter 36 is, so we had a number of chapters here. We're going to be looking at these. You need to know it. So then go ahead and memorize this chapter 17 vocabulary. Do exercise 17 in your book. We'll go over that next week. And go ahead and read chapter 18, which is call in imperative. We'll be looking at call imperative. Any questions? All right.